Was muted. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pixelists podcast, the podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. And as always, we're your hosts. I'm Will. That's Blake. Today we're here to talk a little Worlds Beyond Number.
Yeah, man. It's something weird just happened. Like in the intro, my camera got really dark, so I'm like, "What's happening here?" But
oh yeah, it did. It just did it again. I think.
I don't know what's going on here. So what's happening?
You merely adopted the dark.
That's right. You come to this channel to hear our bad Bane, and actually yours was pretty good. Mine would be pretty bad. So if we can fix this lighting a little bit.
Well, yeah, as Blake's tinkering over there, welcome everybody. Yeah, we're glad to have you back. It is Monday, which means the new episode's coming out tomorrow. So we're scooting it right under the rug. Is that a phrase?
Totally. No, It actually isn't, but I got what you were saying.
There's some phrase adjacent to that one that I was searching for.
Scooting in under the rug.
Yeah. in there, does that sound quasi-familiar?
No.
Y'all let me know in the comments if anybody knows what I'm talking about. But yeah,
try it casually at work, guys, and see if it, someone's like, I was fired. Like, oh, sorry.
Gotta go talk to HR. But yeah, because we got the new episode coming out tomorrow, which I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but pretty interesting cliffhanger at the end of this one. So I'm excited to be able to dive back in as soon as tomorrow. But yeah, excited to talk about it. And as far as any other announcements, it's basically just the usual. Critical Role. The Ravening War just had its finale, so we will be talking about that some point in the near future. And we also been putting out some Diablo content, or I should say that's mainly been Blake. I don't want to steal any of the credit, but for any of you guys playing D4, definitely check that out. And even if you're not, we'd appreciate it if you show those videos some love. My man's been working hard, and we've both been gaming hard. So for anybody else that is actually playing, let us know in the comments. We can maybe do some dungeons together or something.
Yeah. A lot of big changes coming for Diablo too. We should maybe talk about that at some point. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Any other announcements?
I don't think so.
Alrighty, well, let's get right into it then. And as always, we're going to launch into our recap, and we cut that out and host it separately on YouTube. So if you're on just the recap video and you want to hear our full thoughts on this episode, it will be linked in the description box below. You want to take us off today, my friend?
Yeah. I had this weird joke of being like, no.
Just leave the call.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for coming to our recap with that weird joke at the start. So this episode opened up with picking up on the climax of the previous episode, with essentially we had Ursulon confronting the wizard Pain over his dealings with Will Gallows, and seemingly Pain beginning to frame Ursulon in an attack on himself. And that is indeed what happens. As we saw, Pain is going to slice himself with his dagger and immediately is going to fire this electric bolt at Ursulon. And I think it's something like 9 points of damage. It's a lot. Almost his entire health pool. Meanwhile, we have Ame and Suvi, who are essentially rushing down the hallway, trying to get to them in time. And also we have Ursulon, who's going to cast in a similar way that he did back in the prequel or the starting episode, is going to cast invisibility. And there's a lot of mom energy that comes from Suvi this episode. So he basically runs down to mom to be like, hey, I need some help. The fox is going to stay in there. Pain kind of panics, realizing that, okay, I just lost this person who just saw me attack them. So he's actually going to shut the door, lock it, and according to the fox, things get very hot very quickly. Come to find out that Pain is actually burning all of the evidence in his office of the supposed embezzlement that has been occurring, the manipulating of the books that he's been doing. Ursulon, in a very anti-critical way, seems to have no problem breaking down this door, and is going to throw his body at it, knock this door down, and the combat is going to ensue. The highlight of this combat is going to be our Archmage apprentice, Suvi, doing a magic missile attack on Pain. And there's also a moment, by the way, where Pain gets throat lunged by our favorite fox. And we have this moment where we find out the fox only has 2 hit points, in which
Yikes.
Pain is actually going to attack the fox and fortunately misses. So the fox survives, even though there was a moment that everyone was like, it's episode 8, please don't kill the fox. Anyway, this magic missile is going to hit. It's going to knock Pain out. And the party essentially, well, really, Ursulon and Ame feel sorry for the wizard or the guild mage. And Ursulon is going to use Lay on Hands to bring him back. There's a moment where Pain is considering continuing to fight for his life, where Ame basically, through a persuasion check, is like, hey, you've lost. We can figure something out. Don't do this. Around this time, Moro is going to arrive with the other mages and are basically like, what's going on? And they see Pain there on the ground, like blood flowing from his mouth, deep wounds from the arcane missiles, ash in the office. And this persuasion check works, and Pain basically tells a story of, we were having a little roughhousing in the office, and me and Ursulon are actually both from the same area in Silbury, and we love to play indoor croquet. And basically gives like this whole hijink of a explanation of what happened. And is like, yeah, and then at one point Ursulon had my dagger and I turned and accidentally walked into it. And then I shot myself by mistake with arcane missiles. And Suvi is so disgusted at this silly story that she's actually she pockets the dagger. She's going to walk out and kind of storm off. And Ame and Ursulon are like, yeah, that's what happened. And Moro was like, as you would expect, there's no place for this kind of tomfoolery in the Scepter's chorus. Like, how could you guys do something like this? And basically he's going to go off to retrieve Suvi. So as he leaves, Ame and Ursulon basically have this conversation with Pain, where Pain's like, hey, so like, tell me what do you know about Will Gallows? Like, what's happening here? And they basically explain like he has something that we need, and part of our mission is turning you over, and you have a chance now to you have a chance, like, we're not going to kill you, but use it wisely. And Pain basically says, well, I have some documents that would be really valuable to Will Gallows in the library. I can go get it for you. And both of them had an insight check that was very high, and they realized that this is someone who is grasping at straws, totally BSing, is just trying to get away as fast as possible. Ame's insightful to this and basically is like, hey, seriously, like, this is your only chance. Like, we've done our duty. Your best chance is just to run and just get out of here. So Pain kind of just like, all right, well, see you later, and like runs off. Meanwhile, Suvi is approached by Moro, and there's kind of this conversation where it's like, hey, what's going on here? This is wild. And Suvi is like, hey, I have to be honest, and basically reveals a little bit of what she's been hiding, which is, we were sent here because we were suspicious of embezzlement. I sent Ursulon to confront Pain, and then he attacked him. We find out that Moro's not the sharpest tool in the box, because Moro's like, oh my gosh, well then why were they playing indoor croquet? And Suvi's like, well, they weren't. That was the cover. And then he's like, but why did he shoot himself? It was very like why male models energy in this conversation. All that to say, Moro's grateful and basically is like, hey, well, I know you guys have had a tough night, but we still should go see what we've been working on in the Derrig. There's some very exciting things happening. So they have a couple hours to kill before they do that. Suvi's going to go back to Ursulon and Ame. And as she's approaching, Ursulon and Ame have this great conversation about how, hey, it really kind of feels like Suvi is kind of always looking out for us, and we want to kind of pick up our weight a bit more, and like not necessarily like be the one that she's always having to save, but really, carry our weight, so to speak. Around this time, Suvi arrives, and they begin to head off to the armory to gear up before this adventure. And why don't you take it from there?
Yes, sir. So on that same note, where they want to be able to do more, that's why this armory comes into play. And Suvi's like, I basically run this joint. Like, we can go get stuff from the armory. So they head there, and it's a lot more ostentatious than they presumed. It's just kind of like a small, quaint room, and Brennan basically has everyone roll investigation checks, and it's based on those checks, what they kind of find in here, what they discover. Um, and a part of this also is that there is like a ledger that marks like what goes in and out of the armory. And so Suvi knows that her station here kind of allows her to do whatever she wants, but she also realizes that like if they just clean out this whole place, like someone is going to face consequences for that. So she is going to kind of take a note of everything that they end up taking from here. And one of the first things they do see are these large staves that the Azure Battalion uses. They're colloquially, I can never say that word. They're called matchsticks. It's kind of their nicknames. And they are basically these war mage staffs that let you be more proficient with cantrips. And Brennan hands Aabria a little like index card for the stave. And actually, as part of the Patreon, they sent out like the actual stats for all of these items that they end up getting, which I don't want to like go over that here because I know that's like paywalled content and I don't want to just, like say it here. But for those of you that are, patrons, definitely check that out because they're pretty cool. Um, so they see the staves, and then Ame is really impressed with these in particular because their magical enchantment is permanent. Unlike the things she creates, which are basically like a one-time use or at least a limited use. So she actually wants to take one of these herself, kind of to just study it and learn more about how this type of magic operates. So they actually take two, one for Ame and I believe one for Ursulon. Then based on Ame's check, she also finds this stack of fabric that's on this chair that look like bandanas. And we find out that these are witchfire veils, which they're basically kind of like masks for using around magical smoke, such as witchfire. So she takes, I believe, 4 of those. Um, Suvi finds some golden bracers that would actually fit around Ursulon, because one of the things that happens when they come in here, Ursulon in particular is very excited about perhaps getting some new armor or just getting some new gear. But they come into this armory, which is essentially an armory for wizards. So it's not really geared out with things that somebody like Ursulon could use, especially in the sense of things that would fit him. Like there's mention of boots and different jackets, but they're all far too small for someone of Ursulon's stature. These bracers, however, that Suvi finds will actually fit, and they have a minor abjuration on them, we are told. Ursulon finds a drawer full of magical rings, and there seem to be 3 types in here: bronze, copper, and coral. There's kind of a big info dump here with these rings, and like I mentioned in the Patreon, you get a fuller breakdown of them. But from what's revealed in the episode itself, we know that there are bronze, copper, and coral, and the bronze rings are known as steward's rings, and they're basically for people who are going to be carrying heavy loads, doing cargo shipments, loading, unloading, basically. Then we have the copper rings, which are scouts rings, and we're told those are for people who are like on watch duty, scouting duty, guard duty, things like that, with the general idea being that they probably increase your perception in some way. And then finally, we have the coral rings, which are known as sailors' rings, which Suvi hasn't heard of before. But we basically come to find out that these kind of let you breathe underwater. Um, Suvi knows that it's only safe to wear 2 of these magical rings at once, and we know that these are Citadel made and mass produced, and they're basically made to just bolster non-combat abilities for people. She also tells Ursulon that these will resize to fit him, and she gives him a Scout's ring, which is the one that will help with perception. And so Ursulon takes that one, and then he takes the coral one, which lets you breathe underwater. Ame, however, takes a bronze and a copper. So the Scout's ring and then the Steward ring, which is for carrying heavy loads and stuff. And as soon as she puts those on, she starts to kind of sweat profusely and feel a bit sick to her stomach. And Suvi knows that there's a bit of a process to getting attuned to this ring, and that's normal. Ame is then like, I wonder if these would work on non-humans, thinking that she might try to get the fox to wear one of these cargo rings to bolster him up a bit. But they ultimately decide, I think, not to at the time. Oh, it's because they ask the fox, "Are you down to wear a ring?" And he's like, "No, I don't like clothes." And so that doesn't pan out. But one other thing that happens in here is I believe Erika passes a note to Brennan because she is attempting to steal something, but she is not successful as Ursulon and Suvi both notice her do this, and she steals some sort of jacket, we're told. Then they take about the next hour, and again, Suvi marks all of this down in the ledger, and she herself actually does not take a single thing. Um, but having gotten all this new gear, they then take about the next hour to attune to the various things that they got. And during this time, Suvi says that she takes the book that has the collection of her parents' things in it. She says she's going to take that, and so she tries to just hide it amongst her things. And at the end of this hour, Ame now is ripped. She has all these new muscles as she has now successfully attuned to this bronze ring. And we are told she now has a strength score of 19, which
Yeah.
is
For level 1.
massive.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, and higher than Ursulon even. Um, so after this, they go and get on a carriage and are heading toward the port to go to the Wizard Derricks. And on the way, Suvi notices a Citadel carriage parked at the governor's mansion. And because she has the observant feat, she's able to read the lips of the driver of the carriage who is speaking to someone. And he says, "As you wish, Abjur Galani. I believe they should be outside sooner than later. I heard from someone that the Scepter's chorus," and then it gets cut off because Suvi's carriage kind of turns a corner and she can't see anymore. So Suvi believes that what happened with Pain and the Scepter's chorus in them has already made the rounds in terms of gossip. But before they can get too much into that, they have arrived at the port and they board a ship to head out to the Wizard's Derricks. And Moral tells Suvi, like, "Hey, we were unable to capture Pain, but we got this wanted poster, like, we're making moves on it, and it will be taken care of." Suvi's like, "I consider it handled, don't worry about it." So the ship arrives at this massive structure that Brennan describes as 4 steel beams that kind of all come to a point like a pyramid, like a tall, narrow pyramid that's also hollow. And it basically just has all these platforms in it. And in the center of each platform is this like glass crystal disc that's basically like a lens that you can see through, and you can look up and see all the way to the top no matter which platform you're on. And at the very top are these lights that they've been seeing out at sea each night. And there's these basically prism looking lights that seemingly blast light down through these lenses to make something happen. And there's also rune work that they can see on each of these crystal glass discs. So at the top, which is where everyone travels, they travel to the very top, the highest platform. Moro says, like, it's about to begin. Welcome to the, I might butcher this, the Calabel Notomantic apparatus.
Nailed
He
it.
says he says it took 3.5 years to build, but the enchanting could only begin in the last year. So he's like, I could explain more, but it would be better for you just to experience it. Let the wonder begin. And he claps, and these attendant mages on the various levels begin to chant, and Moro even begins to chant, and these light prisms overhead begin to rotate, and the lenses begin to shift, and this basically, the way I envision it, is this beam of light goes down through these lenses into the water below, and it causes this white foam to start coming up from the waves, which builds and builds. And Brennan describes it as this light zooming down and kind of displacing the water. down to the bottom of the ocean floor, maybe a couple 100 feet down. And what is revealed down here is this gargantuan form, bigger than a ship, just massive. And it's kind of moving with breath or palpitation, but there's no face. There's hundreds of tendrils coming off of it, and it's described as like red and cream stripes on its colorization. And it's basically just this massive Leviathan sea monster. And at the front of its body, he describes a series of bioluminescent lights that are kind of lighting up, and a massive tail tucked underneath itself. Just this massive creature, unlike anything they've seen before. And underneath it, where its body comes into contact with the ocean floor, this coral is growing up, basically growing up from anywhere this thing's body touches. And the source of the coral, at the source of it, is like this glimmering blue light, that seems to be kind of soaking out from this Leviathan's body. And at the base of the derrick, the coral is being carved away. And as the light from the prism touches the creature, it's kind of pushed down, and everything is kind of like reverberating from the impact. Moro at this point is like smiling and weeping with joy, and Suvi just asks, "What have you done?" And that's where the episode ends. Once again, episode 8 of The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, The Catch. Again, if you're on the recap and want to hear our full discussion, it'll be linked down below. But let's get into it, man.
Let's do it, man. Great episode, by the way. This was definitely one that I was like, oh man, I'm ready for the next one.
Yeah, for sure. What a cliffhanger. I mean, it's hard not to just start there, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I think we nailed it. I think we talked about, like, in the last episode, the one before, about how we thought, and I don't remember, I don't hear my toddler having a meltdown, by the way, but how we thought that good. How we thought, like, what could be happening out here. And I think what we said in the previous episode was, could this be Naram, the spirit of the sea, being imprisoned or experimented on, or in something happening, and that is then inciting the fury of his lover. I can't think of her name, but of the earth, or like the vines or the plants or what have you. But those that stuff encroaching now and like kind of consuming the surrounding lands. It seems like that is what is happening.
I agree, and I was trying to look up that name because I can't think of it either. It starts with an O, I'm pretty sure. My brain's wanting to say Ophelia. That's not it, but it's like something like that, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm totally with you. Like, I don't know if it's confirmation bias, but I feel like that's got to be what's happening almost.
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure, it seems like that is the case. Hang on, I'm just looking real quick to see if I can track down. Here we go. Transcript. Spirit of the sea, spirit of the green, Orima.
Orima, okay.
Yeah. Naram the Wave Lord. Yeah. Naram the Wave Lord and Orima, or Orima. I can't remember how you pronounce it.
I think it's Orima.
Yeah.
Now that you say that.
Of the Reaching Green.
Because, yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's either literally Naram, which is what we speculated and I think would make sense, or it's like another powerful sea spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was the latter, you would think that Naram would be getting upset and doing things similar to how presumably Orima is with the kudzu. And since we haven't heard of any like ocean attacks or anything weird going on with the ocean, it makes me think that's Naram, and the reason he's not fighting back is because he's imprisoned. So I don't know if we should just full book it and
we should send it 100%. It just makes sense. I mean, the clever little DM detail of the statues that they saw, I mean,
that's true.
The greeting of like the nearby town of like, Naram, I mean, I think it just adds up. These are just little breadcrumbs I think Brennan's put down just to make it make more sense. So
now that you say that, that does call into question something that we talked about last episode of how Moro didn't know the Naram greeting. So do you think he doesn't even know what this thing is down there, or does he know and that was like a
I don't think he was lying. I think it is what you said last episode of like, here's this person stationed here and in his own like ego and ignorance doesn't even know some of the customs. But he also mentions in this episode that they have been speaking to some of the locals and says something like, in a kind of a condescending way, like, you know, they think they really kind of know how things are around here, or they have like their own stories, but they really don't know as much as they think they know. And so I think that's kind of like, I could see how both could be true in the sense of the locals maybe spoke about Naram, but he got enough of what he needed to like fuel what he was doing rather than really learning about the phrase or the saying or what have you.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Which, okay. How did they set this up? It's like this whole thing is like a massive pyramid structure and it took years to build. So did like Naram just haphazardly happen to like swim under this thing at the right moment? Because it's not like, oh, we found this thing and it maybe Naram doesn't move. Maybe he varies, you know, stationary and they were able to build it somewhat around him. But that's the part I couldn't really wrap my head around. Was it just like insane luck that it happened?
I think by some means they caught him in this spot and they built the derrick around him. Because I think what Brennan said was that the because it's like a triangle, that like the steel beams were built intentionally around to because there was some like phrasing about I don't know if it was like the currents or the water or even like the beams of light, but there was something around about either Naram, which I'm going to say Naram, but the sea creature, I don't know if it was like pushing away or pushing back or something, and how these like corners were like kind of creating those boundaries, like those like kind of reasserting like, here's the boundaries of what we have. I don't envision that being built like, don't move for 3 years.
Yeah.
I think in some way they might have caught it and then built those things there to sort of like kind of built the prison, so to speak.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. And I think, didn't they say back in reference to the kudzu, which I hope kudzu, the encroaching plants thing, didn't that roughly start about a year ago? Or am I making that up?
Yes.
I think it was something like that. And maybe it's, you know, gotten worse and worse, but I think that's roughly when it started, which would line up when the enchantments started on this thing.
Okay.
So that lines up to me if everything I just said was true, which maybe it's not. But alrighty, y'all, sorry for the little transition. We had a bit of a dad emergency and had to stop, but we're back now.
Yeah, my bad, I'm a dad, so
it's all good. To them, not even a second passed. So
it's been 12 years.
We all have like completely different facial hair and stuff.
This series ended 8 years ago.
That would be like a funny. I won't get us too distracted here.
So I think we were just talking about like what we think, us thinking it was Naram and like the mechanics of the derrick that had been built around it. And we've been talking about our suspicion about Orima and the Kutsu kind of encroaching on the towns, being her trying to get to Naram or something in something to that regard. But
yeah, some sort of like retribution.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was gonna say we predicted it as much, and it seems like that's the case.
I agree. Honest, I mean, I don't know what else it would be. At least, I mean, I guess that's kind of arrogant to say, but at least with this current theory, all those pieces seem to line up pretty well.
Let me say, if it's not that, I'm quitting the show.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
But so operating under those assumptions, I wonder exactly what this means and what like, because Moro obviously thinks like he's struck big. Like this is the thing that's finally going to get him some renown, some
I was
recognition.
in tears, right?
Yeah, he was happy crying.
Brennan is so good at creating douchey villains, that you're just like, oh gosh.
Yeah,
It's
that
probably harsh to say villain, but you get what I'm saying.
no, yeah, I was gonna bring this up at some point. Is just that all of the villains, I guess NPCs, maybe because I don't mean just the bad guys, but especially the bad guys, have all felt so three-dimensional and different. Like,
Mhm,
because if you just think about Moro, Pain, Gallows, like those are all
mhm,
like I feel like I can really like feel each
mhm.
of those characters, and they're starkly different.
Yeah.
Which as DMs, when you kind of come up with like a villain and like make them compelling but different from just like the typical mustache twirling.
Mhm.
Anyway, that
Well, and
kind of
I
beside
think
the
on
current
that,
point, but
well,
yeah.
just like a quick parking spot there for a second. I know when I've DM'd, my thought has been every character needs to not only, it's the Matt Mercer effect, but not only needs to be starkly different, but needs to have different accents, like
Mm,
different voices.
yeah.
And something I've appreciated about Brennan is how well he creates these different characters while not that he doesn't have accents or doesn't do accents, but it's made me kind of be a bit more cognizant as a DM of I should put more work in how do you create those differences rather than, oh, that person's British, that person's Irish, or
Yeah.
or like what frustrates my wife. She's like, why are there Irish people here? And I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, why? It's an accent. She's like, there's no Ireland in this world. I'm like, why are you so caught on this one accent? So she's part Irish, so that's probably why
Oh,
she,
okay. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I can see it now, though. Now that
yeah,
you mention
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Um,
So
but yeah, totally agreed. Just chalk another point into the Brennan is
yeah,
amazing at this
yeah.
breadbasket. Um, okay, but so clearly Moro thinks he's onto something huge here, and if
Mhm.
if it indeed is Naram, then clearly he is, because I don't know if it's fair to say that Naram is like one of the most powerful. I wouldn't say that, but clearly is a powerful, great spirit. Um,
Yeah.
and again, they seem to be harvesting this coral that springs up because of the liquid that
Coral.
did you parse that the same way as me during the
Yeah,
recap that
sorry. Your Carl made me think of Coral from The Walking Dead.
coral?
Yeah. You said Coral. It's very Carl-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It seems everything Naram touches blesses or sprouts this coral of some, so I can't not hear it now,
Oh.
of some kind. And yeah, I think they're harvesting it.
Yeah, so I'm wondering like I wonder is it always this coral, or is it by by nature of the fact that he's in the ocean right now? Like maybe
Yeah,
this liquid is just like life-giving, and
yeah,
because of being at the ocean it's coral, but like use this liquid somewhere else, maybe it does something
yeah,
else. I mean, we do know they're making these wands,
yeah.
presumably with whatever they're harvesting from this coral.
I think Suvi said it well, or maybe it was Ame, when they were reflecting on that, and they said it feels like what you see when like people are about to go to war, and we
Mhm.
know that the kingdom is at war with Gathmire,
There's a yeah,
and Rue,
Galthmy or something like that.
yeah, something like that. So maybe, yeah, maybe we got a little bit of a picture of how they're using it, and maybe Moro, you know, is excited at the idea of, on top of just fame and fortune, likely being the person who ends the war, so to speak, or at least feeds the upper hand. But yeah, something going on with that, I think.
Do you
Presumably some powerful reagent.
do you I just operated under this assumption, but now I'm not sure. Do you remember that being the case, that those wands were being made in some relation to the Derek?
I don't know. I don't know if they were making them. The impression I originally got was that they needed like a very specific type of magical instrument. So they had gone out and acquired like tons of wands, and then they were testing to see which ones had the innate proficiency of what they needed to control Naram, or in some way make the harvesting more easier. But I also am comfortable with the other way around, like thinking about where does this coral go? How are they using it? Maybe it's to make those wands.
Yeah, I can't remember, so I hate having to like operate in the gray area. Y'all let us know in the comments if you guys do explicitly remember, or maybe I'll go re-listen to that part after this. But if they came from the coral or whatever, that the derricks in some way, then that makes sense to me, because they now are like, they have all these things and now they're testing for the ones that like were affected. Because it would make
Right.
sense if the reason those can control water with their cantrip or whatever it was would be because it was somehow like tied to Naram's power. That checks out to me. But if it was just like random wands they went out and bought, and just sometimes for whatever reason some of those have that capability, makes less sense to me. But I can't
Yeah.
remember if we do know that they were from that or not. But anyways, I guess if they are, then that makes sense for one thing they're doing with those, which then, you know, like you mentioned, to give them an upper hand in the war also makes sense. Um, and I'm sure these things will get further explained, maybe even as soon as next episode. But I'm just curious what the implications are from for capturing such a great spirit. Like what do they plan on doing with this? Um, and I'm
Well,
also
and
go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm also, we know about the kudzu or kudzu or whatever. I'm also curious, like why Orima hasn't been more like,
President?
yeah, more like, why has there not been a retribution more so than just this seemingly pretty slowly encroaching vegetation?
Yeah.
You know, should like, especially if this is her lover and it is like
Mm,
literally being imprisoned and tortured esque in a way, you would think
yeah.
that would warrant like a more aggressive response.
Well, we still don't really know the mechanics of like the spirit realm versus the physical realm.
True.
You know, like namely, why is Naram physically there
Yeah, I was gonna
and
bring
not in
this
the
up
spirit
too.
realm? Um, and you know, there may be something linked there about maybe Orima is not able to come, but is able to influence from
Yeah.
afar the vegetation and grow up this kutsu to try to save Naram. I imagine that is something we'd also get more clarity on. Um, I'm more curious what's going to happen in this next episode. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, surely. I mean, are they gonna? Is Suvi going to just outright be like, "Stop this"? I mean, Moro has been so. I mean, he's in tears, so excited about this. I mean, feels like she'd have to because Ursulon's a spirit. But then again, it's like you're out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by these mages. Like, what's your game plan?
Still level 1.
True.
Um, yeah, that's a good point. I want to talk about that, but one last thing before we completely move on. Do you have any thoughts as to why you think Naram would be in this realm,
No.
especially considering
Yeah.
Orima seemingly isn't?
I Moro said we caught it or caught him. I can't remember which one he said. Um, so there's some whether they laid a trap or like through coincidence that we talked about. I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe they
What do you think?
lured him out somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Was just wondering if you had any thoughts there. Now, on to what you were saying. Yeah, I'm really curious because I guess one at this point, and that might change 10 seconds into tomorrow's episode, but at this point, they don't know it's a spirit, or at least Suvi
Right.
doesn't know it's a
We're just
spirit.
we're just guessing.
Right. Ursulon seemingly would be able to, like, even if Ursulon, the character, doesn't know instantly, it seems like that's something Brennan would probably be like, Ursulon, you recognize this as like one
Yeah.
of your own type of thing. So
Yeah. I can see that.
I feel like they'll find that out very quickly if they don't already know. And when that happens, Ursulon's obviously going to have an issue with it, and Ame is obviously going to have an issue with it.
Mhm.
Suvi, the cliffhanger was like, "What have you done?" But I'm not convinced that she necessarily would be starkly against it just for just off jump. Like, we've seen her to be very ruthless and kind of, not just have certain stances on things because they're like the right thing to do. Now, maybe her proximity to Ursulon would make her feel that way without needing another reason. But I don't know. She's cold blooded, is what I'm saying. So, like, if she does see this as a way that the Citadel could gain power, maybe she would be
Mm.
for it, even. So, like, I'm curious if that dynamic comes into play at all.
I could maybe see it. It would be more of a stretch for me, but I could see that happening for sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, if it regardless of the inter-party dynamic there, let's assume they all are on the same page. I don't see it coming to blows in this instant because like you said, like they're outnumbered, outmatched here and stranded as well if they
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm curious because I mean, so far everyone's kind of beat to their drum with the exception of Will Gallows. And so we there's a lot of ego with Suvi, especially talking about the army, like, hey, I pretty much run this place. Like
yeah.
and I actually said this probably 3 or 4 episodes ago where I said, hey, I think we're heading towards a moment where Suvi realizes there's an extent to her influence. And maybe that's going to be happening this next episode. I don't know. So,
Yeah, I mean, because it definitely feels like Moro's put all his eggs into this basket. So, like, if there was pushback from Suvi, he might be like, "Well, I gotta kill you," like, and I'll clean up that mess, but like, you're not stopping what I'm doing here. Like, this is my
mhm.
one chance, type of thing.
Unless Suvi comes back and says, and blackmails and says, how do you think the Citadel would care knowing that you kept this mage in your employ who was embezzling money and you were so focused on this project, this hobby that you allowed treason to happen. I could maybe see something like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's she's got some ammunition for sure. But yeah, I don't, yeah, I don't see it coming to a fight. But I mean, I don't know what happens otherwise, especially if they know, especially if it is Naram and they can figure that out all in this moment,
Mhm.
which maybe those things don't happen. Um,
I mean, if it did come to blows, they got a few cool rings to help.
that's true. Ame is
With-
pretty
These
buff
things
now.
are these things are broke as crap for level 1, dude. 19 strength.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And it's cool too because we got the insight, I think episode 2, maybe 3, when they attacked the possessed captain, and Brennan mentioned that a weakness of witches is their low strength score. So it's a nice, it's an item that complements her character very well, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to again, I don't want to like I mentioned this earlier, but I don't want to like just reveal the stuff that only was revealed to patrons just cuz I'm sure they don't want that to be a thing either. Um but maybe after we finish I could show
Yeah.
you some of the things cuz there's some cool stuff. But like I think Suvi alluded to during the episode, like it's dangerous to wear multiple rings.
Yeah.
Some of the mechanics of that are explained and it's
Ah,
pretty
that's cool.
interesting. Um
I thought that was like the role play explanation for having a limit on attunements or
mm.
something. And then also them feeling sick was what I assumed to be like a role play explanation for having to attune.
Oh no, so there's actual
Okay,
mechanics for
cool.
both of those things.
Wow,
Um,
that's cool.
but yeah, so and maybe like I'm sure like down the road, especially like once this is discussed in canon, then maybe we can come back and discuss this for those of you that are like, oh, I'm not a patron, like this, I want to know. So maybe we can bring this up again later in the future. But yeah, it's really interesting. Um, okay, so I guess before we leave the whole cliffhanger reveals and
Yeah.
everything. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch
No,
on
yeah.
there?
No.
Yeah. So I mean, last thing on it is if they don't fight, I guess it's more of a just kind of holding their cards for now and like
Yeah,
reevaluating for like a
I could
plan later.
see I could see them going and getting Wavebreaker and it being like, hey, this is the mission right now. Like we have to free Naram.
Yeah, that
And so them basically coming back, like you said, holding their cards for now. Like we're not going to fight today. We're going to go get ready for the fight 2 days from now or 3 days from now.
yeah, that's a good point because I mean, presumably they are going to get Wavebreaker unless Gallows pulls some kind of underhanded, well, you know,
Mhm.
you got to do this for me now because, you know, whatever his excuse may be for why they didn't fulfill their part of the bargain. Um, assuming there's no, you know, underhandedness like that, this would serve as a next immediate like step and direction for the campaign. Obviously, there's still the main story, if I can call it that, of utilizing Wavebreaker to figure out what's going on with Ame. But I imagine at least, if not the immediate next step, one of the next steps is going to be like away from here, or like they're going to have to like do something else type of thing. So like this could be a, while we're here, let's take care of this.
But
That yeah.
even that feels a bit clunky because it's like an attack on your own people, you know, like in the Azure battalion there to reinforce. I mean, I just really wonder like how much is Suvi actually able to do?
That's
Like
true.
I know she can sorry, I hear my kid crying, so I'm just looking at our camera. I know Suvi's able to like flex and you know use her position to an extent, but at a certain point it's like you can't like raid your own base, you know?
Right. That yeah, that's a really good point. Because I mean, even if they have time to plan, let's call it, this is still like very high level, for lack of a better phrase here, stuff going on. Like a
Right.
great spirit that's imprisoned by a whole like industrial military complex. Like,
Yeah.
you know, even with prep time for my
Yeah.
Batman fans, I don't know if that's really going to change anything for them.
Right.
Unless it's like a stealth mission.
Right.
But yeah,
Okay, and I can maybe see that.
and then that's a nice kind of segue with Suvi and going against, you know, the powers that be to an extent. We have the Citadel carriage that we know to be at the governor's mansion with Abjur Galani, I believe,
Mm.
seemingly there to check up on whatever the hell Suvi has gotten into with this news going around, which we don't know the full extent of kind of like her clearance to be out doing these things. We just know that she got special permission
Mhm.
to leave to go like say goodbye to Grandmother Wren.
Mhm.
And is it, we had the same thing last time. Is it Silver or what's
Yeah.
her, or is
Yeah.
that the, or is that
That's
her
right.
boo
Oh, the
thing?
stone. Oh, dang it. You're right. Uh oh my
Because I think
god.
Silver was the guy, but I, why do we do this every time?
Um
Stone soft.
I think Silver was the guy, and we're doing it again. Okay, let's see here. Of course, this one doesn't have all the characters listed.
Stone soft silver Suvi silence.
Silence is the
That's her.
Magi, right?
Yeah, that's her. Or the person.
Steel.
Steel. There we
Steel.
go. Steel did say take as long as you need,
Yeah.
but I mean that's Steel, her like mentor, telling her that in terms of like the power, like the overall power structure being like, where's Suvi? She's saying goodbye to Rin, and then they hear Suvi is accusing a mage at the Scepter's chorus, and you know,
Mm,
like they'd be like, wait, what? Like that has nothing to do with Grandmother
mm.
Rin. So like maybe she could be already kind of getting into not trouble, but like having to answer some questions that she probably doesn't want to answer at this
Yeah.
stage.
Well,
Um,
and it's like we said around like episode 2 or 3, where, and you just mentioned it, like when you have to take time off from work, your boss is going to say, take as much time as you need.
yeah,
But there's also a point your boss is going to be like, hey, we kind of need you back.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, I definitely, they know grandmother, they presumably know grandmother Wren has died. And now it's been however many days since then. I think Ursulon said it had been like 2 weeks or something, or 10 days prior, he was like working in a carnival or something. I don't know if it's actually been that many days, but
Right.
it's been a little bit after she passed away. So yeah, I will say though, I didn't take it as Galani coming to check on Suvi. I took it as Galani had business there and was also cognizant of the fact that Suvi was also there.
Yeah, I could see that. Not like necessarily like, oh, Suvi made a mess, go clean it up, but the news has already reached them that this stuff has happened. Um, so yeah, I could just see all this was to say that on top of Suvi being conflicted, for lack of a better word, of like going on this Naram mission against these people, she's also going to have the added pressure from the Citadel, who aren't like,
Yeah,
they are somewhat in the know that she's no longer just mourning grandmother Ren.
yeah, and
Um,
this, yeah, and there has to be like, yeah, your duties. Like you work for a pretty big deal of a person, like you know. So
yeah,
yeah, that's an interesting pain point that I'm curious to see how she navigates that with Brennan.
yeah, and speaking of Suvi, uh, we kind of got another instance of kind of her having her own
Yeah, my way.
agenda,
Yeah,
as it were. Um,
you talk about pain,
yeah,
or yeah,
with pain, with
yeah,
um, just being like he's gonna die, or essentially like, or like not being okay with kind of them, meaning
yeah,
Ame and Ursulon, letting him off the hook, and her just still going to spill the beans to Moro. I thought it was interesting, and this is something we've talked about before. Um, but there was an allusion to the pair and the spare, which is something that the cast talked about, saying that like there's this dynamic where there's when in a group of three, there's like two that are kind of close, and then like the third wheel. I think it is shaping up more and more to be that Ame and Ursulon are going to be that pair, and Suvi's going to be the one over
yeah.
here on an island.
And I thought it was going to be Ursulon and Suvi, with Ame kind of over by herself. But definitely this episode, I had the same. I remembered that same analogy and thought, okay, yeah, I think Suvi is definitely the one who's kind of off by her own. And I mean, she tells us as much that, grow up in the Citadel, you're trained to be a warrior, like you're
Yeah,
trained to be a soldier. So the total lack of empathy that we then see Ame bring to the table, like it kind of makes sense, the tension between them even.
yeah, totally. And I'm wondering, like, especially in this long form campaign, when that's gonna like break. And I don't mean that Suvi's gonna change, but just like when that's gonna come to a boiling point. Because like it could
Yeah.
be soon, but it could also be 2 years down the line. So
Mhm.
like when is she gonna turn against the Citadel? And not that that's an inevitability, but
Yeah,
it
sure.
does seem like that's at least at some point probably what's gonna happen. Um,
It feels like what the Citadel's intentions are at some point going to run in friction with what Ame or even Ursulon would want to accomplish.
yeah, agreed.
Especially if they, in the short term, stop Moro from what he's doing, and then someone comes back from over the top, like Galani, for example, who's there.
Right.
If she finds out about the thing and is like, well, no, we're not canceling this. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Or worse, if they've already like taken care of it, now there's this thing about like, why would you do this, Suvi? Like, why would you? I don't know. I'm very interested to see how this all plays out.
Yeah. Me too. So I don't really have more to espouse on it, but I'm just very interested in that whole dynamic. And like I said,
Hmm.
this could be something we talk about for the next 60 episodes.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's definitely right there and ripe, and I think it's gonna just keep. I think that's
Hmm.
gonna be a recurring kind of dynamic with
Yeah.
this party.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that at least for right now in this episode that it wasn't a pain point for Ame and Ursulon. Now they weren't privy to the conversation Suvi had with Moro, but kind of how Ame and Ursulon came out of this was that like we need to be stronger for Suvi,
Hmm.
so I thought that was interesting as well.
Hmm.
Um okay. Yeah, another thing I wanted to just briefly talk about was the fox and how like he seemingly almost did get just taken away from us.
Yeah. It seems like you can't just ritual cast, summon familiar
Well,
So
we did get some info on this in the fireside
okay,
chat.
okay,
And I mean, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite since I just said I didn't want to like share the specifics of those items, but I feel like this is slightly different.
yeah,
Um,
okay,
but we do have a bit of a reveal that there are ways, like if the fox were to be struck and drop to 0 and be kaput, there are ways for the fox to come back.
okay,
We're told as much from Brennan. There was a bit more detail, and so I won't go into that.
yeah, okay.
But we do know that much. But it was just funny during the episode how like it just I don't know if it didn't cross her mind, but it's seeming like there was like a light bulb moment when he was like, "Well, I'm gonna attack the fox," and they were like,
Yeah,
"What? He
she's
only
like,
has 2 hit points."
I got the whole like, what's the meme format where it's like, wait, no, not like that. You know, maybe not. I don't
Uh,
know.
maybe. I
It's
know
I
that.
can't. It would make it even worse now trying to explain it, but it's like a meme format of someone being like, "Do this," and then something happens that backfires, and they say, "No, not like that." But I can't remember anything
I
else
think I know
about
what you're
it.
talking about.
So,
Um,
thanks for the pity.
yeah, yeah, I got you.
You're like, yeah, it's hilarious.
um,
So, yeah,
like,
no, I got the same sense of that light bulb though, for being like, wait, what?
yeah,
And just realizing, okay, 2 hit points.
which um I guess there's no point in diving in on it since we do know that there are ways to bring back the familiar. But yeah, I was really nervous because we knew that the witch familiars operate differently from standard 5e familiar where you can just recast it. So I was worried that there would be no way to bring back the fox, but good to know we've got a safety net that I'm sure it doesn't always work, but at least there in some cases there is a safety net.
Mhm.
Um okay. I'm gonna I'm gonna wait on that. There's another part that I could bring up, but now I'm teetering on the edge of. I
It's too
need to,
much.
yeah, I need to find a.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'll look at their FAQ and see if they do explicitly outline like what they're comfortable with people
Mhm.
talking about or
We
not.
should have Brennan on and just kind of give us
Yeah,
the scoop on
yeah,
what to
yeah.
share.
That's a good idea.
We'll get him on for the next one,
Brennan,
guys.
we know you watch, so
Yeah.
if you want to come on, just let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
Welcome
You know,
anytime.
you can call me or just show up at my house. I'll make you dinner. Just whatever.
Yeah,
Sleep in my bed. It's cool.
open invitation. Oh,
Okay, what else? What's
um,
I
go ahead.
mean, do you think we'll see Pain again?
Probably not, unless it's through Gallows somehow. Like if they go
Yeah.
to get Wavebreaker and like Pain's already there, captured or something,
Yeah.
which would be interesting if they had to like truly face the consequences of their actions in that way. Like
Mhm.
they see his corpse or something.
Yeah.
But other than something like that, I doubt it. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I feel the same way. Yeah. Um, I do think it could be interesting for him to show back up, but I don't necessarily see that being the case. Um, so
Which I wonder if in this as your battalion mini story arc, if I can call it that, if we'll find out any more about Ghost.
she's the one who worked for Finley.
Yeah, the one that Suvi was supposed to
Yeah.
like put in the good word for. And maybe like even if
Yeah.
that doesn't happen on camera, maybe it's still safe to assume that that did happen.
I see
Um
Ghost popping back up if they ever make their way back to the Citadel. Like maybe she also made it there or something.
yeah. I hope so cuz I would really like to see that
Yeah.
character again.
Yeah.
Um
And the candle golem.
yeah. One other thing during that I should have brought up a second ago was with the whole, Suvi wanting to end pain. I thought what was really interesting was Ursulon immediately lay on handsing Pain and bringing him
Yeah.
back up, especially from Pain being the one that was basically threatening to kill Ursulon not moments before. I just thought that spoke a lot to Ursulon's character, that wasn't
Yeah.
even like a question in his mind.
Yeah.
It was
It
like,
is. It is his character's character. But and it's interesting the friction. We've always seen Ame and Suvi kind of have that friction, but we saw it with Ursulon and Suvi for being like he's gonna die anyway. Like, why does it matter? and Ursulon just basically being like, that's just not who I am. Like that's just not who I am, you know?
Yeah.
So we did get a cool glimpse as to the kind of person he is. You know, he's working towards being that knight that he saw by the road.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I really like that because especially we don't know the details, but Ursulon's had a pretty rough life. I think it's safe to assume. Like he was basically
Mm.
on homeless for a majority of it. Had to work at a carnival, and probably that was probably one of the better things he's done in terms of like dignified over the past 10 years or whatever. So it's
Yeah,
just
and even that's a low bar.
yeah, and
So
even having gone through all of that, still has like the empathy and the compassion and
mm.
the knight the knighthoodedness to instantly drop that heel. So I
Yeah.
liked that.
Yeah.
Two other quick points, and then I toss it to you for anything else you wanted to talk about. But real quick, we got another mention. This might have been during the after show, but it's not like it's something they've talked about. I can't remember, but we got another mention of this mechanic of weaker mages in this world dumping spell slots into a pool for more powerful mages to utilize, which is something that we kind of got a glimpse of with the spell ring that Brennan described of Moro, how it had like extra spell slots for him to use if he needed to. And we know that Suvi's dad had a similar type of ring.
Mm.
Um, so not that this is anything new, but just since it was brought up again and like explicitly spelled out, I just thought that was so cool. And like,
Yeah, I
so
think I missed that detail. That's cool though.
it might have been in the after show where they brought it up again. But yeah, I just a little fascinating piece of world building that I just feel like makes so much sense, especially in this type of like wizardocracy type of society where like, yeah, like all you're good for is dumping your spell slots for me to
Yeah.
use because I'm like that much better than you.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I'll,
but to me, that makes me think not to underestimate Moro. You know, I mean, Payne was a pushover, but Brennan said it himself that Payne was relegated to a tiny little office as a bookworm, so clearly wasn't too proficient. I would expect a lot more out of Moro, especially with that ring.
yeah, yeah, true. And I guess it's mechanically probably safe to assume that Pain was also like level 1
I guess
ish.
so. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious what level Moro is, if we
Yeah.
can look
Probably
at it that
20.
way. Um, but yeah, I'm really curious to know how this spell slot pool works. It
Yeah.
seems like broken, but I'm surely it's not just like an infinite pool that certain people can take from. Like I'm sure his ring, if it's a magic
Yeah.
item, just gives him an extra X amount of slots.
Yeah.
But even
It's kind
still, it's
of
really cool.
it's a little Calamity inspired because didn't Laren give
Oh
Sam
yeah,
Riegel's character
yeah,
a spell
Sam.
slot?
Yeah, he had like a spell slot that he then gave to Laren, right?
Someone had a spell slot they gave to someone else, is all I remember.
Yeah, Sam is the one that had it.
Okay.
And then yeah, I think he gave it to Laren, which Aabria actually brought up Calamity and Laren, I think in the after show. It
Yeah,
wasn't
okay.
like a big point or anything, but she was just talking about how much she loves her wizards.
Yeah.
Um, so that was fun. And also I haven't gone back to like actually confirm this, but does this or actually I guess you haven't really listened to much of the children's adventure, but I saw somebody say now having seen Ravening War, I understand why during the children's adventure, Lou, Brennan, and Aabria kept saying, "Come on, Provolone," and I don't remember them saying that, but now I'm like really curious if they have said that.
Hmm.
Uh, so if for any of y'all that have watched the children's adventure, and let me know if you remember them saying that.
Yeah, okay.
It's obviously
Interesting.
something that could easily just gone over my head since I didn't understand it,
Yeah.
but I thought that was funny. If so, um, the only other quick thing I wanted to mention, let me throw up my notes real quick. Um, Not much to talk about here, but we still don't know what this collection is that Moro had of her parents. We know that Suvi now is taking that, so if she
Did
gets
we
away with it, which hopefully she will.
did we
Or-
find out if her two friends clocked her hiding it?
Yes. Okay. See, I wasn't sure what that sleight of hand roll was for, because like, why would they care if she was hiding that? So I didn't know if that was like a to be revealed at a later date type of thing, like if and when they finally leave, if Moro's
Mm,
like, "Where's my book?" And maybe that
yeah.
was like going to depend on that roll she made in that moment.
I think he gave it to her, right?
Yeah, he did. I don't know if he like gave it to her to keep though, but like he was like,
Yeah.
she was like, "I want to see my parents' things," and he was like, "It's in this book."
Yeah.
So
It's my
yeah, I don't
mom's
know.
diary. I'm
Yeah.
gonna need that back.
So
Uh,
yeah, I don't
I took
know.
it as like her just being guarded, just not. She's the more guarded one of her friends, and we see this happen again and again. Like for example, this most recent episode, maybe it was after the combat with Pain, or I can't remember when it was, but um, they were kind of like swapping not notes, but just like everyone good. And Ame was like, "Suvi, are you okay?" And she was like, "I'm fine," which is what she typically says. And
Yeah.
so I didn't know if it was like of a more guarded, like I don't want them to know I have it, like I don't want to have a conversation about it,
Mm.
so I want to tuck it away.
Yeah, that's interesting, and that makes more sense, honestly, for Brennan asking for that role in this moment. So I didn't even think about that, but I like that. I think that plays into her character of like not wanting to answer any questions that
Yeah,
might inevitably come if they were to see her do that.
right.
Um, so again, don't have much to say on it in this moment, but I'm glad that thread hasn't been lost amongst everything else going on, and that
Yeah,
presumably soon we might get to find out what
yeah,
exactly is in
right.
that book. Um, which I think she said something about like it had pressed flowers in it. Maybe I'm getting confused.
I don't know. I
Okay.
for some, but it's one of those things where you're like, I think I heard that, but then you're like, wait, is this one of those things where you just think you did, but you never did? You know,
Yeah.
Joey
That's
calls it
kind of how
the
I feel too.
Joey calls it the sleeper effect, where like I think that's what it's called, where like someone says something, but there's no like basis to it, and you're like, yeah, I've heard that
Yeah,
somewhere. So
I could see that.
anyway,
So yeah.
I've heard too much outside's actually bad for you. It's like I've heard that. Yeah, I should stay inside.
Yeah, I should just stay on my computer, I guess.
Yeah,
Play some
I
more
should.
video games.
Yeah.
You insist.
Yeah. All right.
Uh
Well, I think that does it.
yeah, I was just gonna ask if you had anything else,
Yeah.
but that pretty much covers it for me.
Yeah. Overall, a great episode, and I'm really excited for the next one.
Me too. Which tomorrow. So I'm excited. It's gonna
Here
be
we
funny
go.
when it's like explicitly not Naram and like everything we just talked about was completely bogus.
Yeah. And Amy is like, Amy. Ame is like, I was just thinking about your Denise short that you put up on TikTok, which was
Oh, did
so good. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
I was gonna ask because I knew you hadn't seen that narrative telephone, so I'm glad you
Oh,
watched
that
it.
was so good. She was awesome.
Yeah.
But despite the point, people who are like totally lost right now, they're like, "What?" No, I just I can just see like Ahmed being like, "This is Naram, right?" And Brendan being like, "No." And any idiot who thinks it is, we're like, "Oh, okay,
Frantically changing his DM
yeah."
notes. Like,
It's yeah, Nafam, this other guy. So, all right. Well, guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. We so appreciate it. Got lots of D&D and apparently Diablo content if you're curious about any of that stuff. We got more Worlds Beyond coming up, the Ravening War epilogue, final episode, Critical Role, and we'll see if there's anything else that happens this week. Anything you want to add, Will?
no, you didn't watch the Ravening War shorts, right?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Even though that one's blowing up.
I know.
I saw it's blowing up.
I was because you said you watched the Amy Carrero one, so I was like, wait, hopefully he didn't watch those other ones.
No, I didn't. I didn't.
All right,
Well,
good,
because you
good.
had episode 6 in the title, so I was like, okay, I'm not going to watch this.
Yeah, yeah. All right, good.
So, yeah.
But no, yeah, that covers it. We just need a quick thumbnail.
Ooh.
I got an idea. Maybe
Okay.
one of
Hit
us
me with
could
it.
be like the like deliriously happy crying
Yeah.
Moro, and the other person could be like the what are you doing,
Yeah.
Suvi?
I can be the crying guy.
Okay, I'll be the.
Okay. I wish I had like some clear tears or whatever.
Maybe I can add some big fake ones
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
in post. Okay. Beautiful.
All right. Well,
Alrighty,
we'll
y'all.
catch you guys later.
Have
Well,
a good
see
one.
you.
Bye.
Bye.